And we're live. So welcome everyone who's joining today's event. I'm actually going to turn this right over to Andre, but if at any point you can't hear or you can't, well, if you can't see as well, please feel free to type in the text box in the chat section and I'll make sure to troubleshoot directly. So with that, turn over to our good friends at State.
Thank you very much, Chris. My name is Andre Goodfriend. We're going to, and welcome to all the participants out there. We're trying something new today with using the GovUp platform for a live discussion on the Open Government Plan. We're seeing how well it goes and how we might be able to use a platform like this in the future. But we'll start with basic introductions of who we are seated around the table. My name is Andre Goodfriend. I'm currently a senior advisor in the Office of E-Diplomacy at the Department of State.
Hi, my name is Bridget Roddy. I'm also an E-Diplomacy at State Department and work on creative diplomacy program.
I'm Bill Christopher. I'm newly arrived in E-Diplomacy.
Hi, I'm Mary Lou Johnson Pizarro. I'm also an E-Diplomacy and International Relations Officer.
Good afternoon. I'm Lazani Gates, and I support the Bureau of Information Resource Management. I'm a data architect. I support the Open Government, Open Data policy.
I'm Sharita Diggs, and I'm also with the Information Resource and Management Bureau here at the Department of State.
And my name is Jessica Klein, and I'm an advisor in the Office of Foreign Assistance Resources.
Hello, my name is Sean Blakely. I'm with the Office of Chief Architect at the Department of State, and I'm leading the Open Data initiative.
So thank you. And what we're going to do now is talk about our different roles with regard to the Open Government Plan. The Open Government Plan, State Department's Open Government Plan is scheduled to be released mid-September. September 15th is the target date. And looking at the discussion that we've had online with regards to the Open Government Plan, we wanted to be able to talk to a number of issues that we received questions about. Whether with regard to the plan itself or with regard to the type of platforms we use to collaborate, to engage with the public, the benefits of user experience, or open data, how are we making our data transparent, or with regard to foreign assistance and how we're able to utilize foreign assistance data in furthering U.S. foreign policy goals. Our participants here will talk about that more in depth. What I'll talk about for a few minutes is how we went about putting together this year's Open Government Plan. It's been roughly a year-long effort, at least from my part, but certainly actually going back before me. This is our fourth Open Government Plan. Each one has been coordinated throughout the State Department with regard to how do we answer the questions of how are we implementing the Open Government Initiative that President Obama signed on his first day in office. And we come at that from a number of different points, whether it's by implementing new technologies or by working with civil society, working with the public, and carrying out our foreign policy mission through being open and exemplifying the values that we try to incorporate into the Open Government Plan. What we've tried to do this year is highlight that connection between openness and the policies and implementation of our foreign policy goals. Essentially saying that this Open Government Plan is not being put together simply to show that we are carrying out open government, and that the initiatives that are incorporated in it are there only for the purpose of open government and to meet the criteria of the Open Government Initiative, but rather to tie those initiatives to the way to what we believe is good governance and the overall flagship initiatives of the State Department. So throughout this Open Government Plan, there are a number of initiatives that are described, and some of them are technological, such as open mapping. Others are very much pre-technology, such as working with different advocacy groups or the foreign relations of the United States, publishing those documents which we began publishing in the 1860s, or even counting the fact that we had that incorporating a library into the State Department at when the State Department was formed in the 1700s was in fact an aspect of open government, because that was a way for the public to participate in governance by writing books and having those books included in our library. So we went through the entire mission of the State Department and all of the various offices here to identify what we were doing or how open government supports the various missions of these offices and the initiatives that they had put in place to carry out that mission. So you'll see that between 2014 and 2016, the number of actual initiatives that are identified has increased substantially, from perhaps a dozen collaborative initiatives to nearly 20 collaborative initiatives. Or with regards to transparency initiatives, there were very few mentioned in the 2014 plan, and we've got well over 30 in this plan. But that's not necessarily that we've done that much more, but that we've identified that these are things that we have been doing and that they support our overall mission. So with that, and that's the overall framework, and we shifted our flagship initiatives around so that rather than technological initiatives, the initiatives this year are harnessing the data revolution for sustainable development goals, or improving the way we carry out diplomacy and development, goals that are included in our strategic plan or in the quarterly diplomacy and development review. Real flagship initiatives that are supported by open government. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to talk about how what they're doing fits into the plan. Bridget, could you go ahead?
Sure. Andre was mentioning that a lot of the programs and initiatives that are mentioned in the Open Government Plan are focused both on technology and engaging with civil society. And one of the programs that we started at the State Department that actually was one of the flagship initiatives in the very first Open Government Plan is the Virtual Student Foreign Service. And so this is a way for U.S. college students to volunteer to help the U.S. government, so not just the State Department, but across the entire U.S. government with the work that we're doing to help us be more effective, more efficient, to have insights from bright, talented youth that are in our country or studying abroad to help move us forward, make sure that we stay on the cutting edge, both of technology and also in how we engage with the public and with our citizens. So that's one of the programs that we've run in the Office of E-Diplomacy. And something that we take into consideration in running that program is also looking at, Andre mentioned, user experience. And if we're engaging with citizens and with the public, what does this look like? How are we releasing data? How do citizens want to take that data? What do we want to do with it? Are we releasing the data in a way that makes sense for people? Or if we're engaging with college students that are helping us on different projects, what does that look like? Are we doing things like using Google Hangout like we are now, or Skype conversations? So ways that we connect with our colleagues and also with the public, how can we bring that more into the work of diplomacy? So I think something that is always important to keep in mind is keep the user or the people that you're engaging with in the forefront of whatever that engagement might be. So another example is actually using this GovUp platform. What we want to do at the State Department is to find a way for the department to connect with civil society and with foreign governments and with technologists on a way that doesn't require necessarily physically traveling and flying all over the world, but by having these online conversations and discussions that we can have continually and to keep up engagement. So those are two of the programs, the Virtual Student Foreign Service program and then this new GovUp initiative that we're working on in the Office.
Thank you. Jessica?
Sure. So again, my name is Jessica Klein, and I'm leading on foreign aid transparency, not just for State Department, but for the entire interagency. State Department manages a website called foreignassistance.gov that collects, standardizes, and publishes all of the U.S. government's foreign assistance investments around the world. And so while we're doing that to try to be more transparent and to put data out there, we're also doing it through mechanisms that are trying to include the public in the process. So our team has worked with E-Diplomacy, using the Virtual Student Foreign Service, and then also using the Diplomacy Lab to connect with academic institutions and students as we develop the website so that it works for people who are actually using it or who could use it. So foreignassistance.gov is U.S. government's primary mechanism for reporting to the International Aid Transparency Initiative. We partner with governments around the world, helping them make use of the data that we publish so that they can better program their own resources, that their citizens can hold them accountable, and so that we can show the results of our programs around the world. We have been a commitment in all 3 U.S. national action plans, and this year we're really focusing on improving the quality of the data that we're publishing, and really within the State Department, looking across the State Department with every bureau and assessing gaps and assessing data quality issues. So we have a foreign assistance data review effort that's going on. And we also have an agency onboarding toolkit that will help every agency be more successful in this endeavor. Another effort that our office is leading is a website called Find, which is at find.state.gov. And this is to make country performance data public, so that we can measure where our funds are going along with performance data, and then make it to share best practices and scientific analysis.
Thank you. Sean?
Yes, one of the initiatives that I'm leading for the department is Open Data Initiative. This was initiated back in 2009 through the president's initiative, and so by which we basically, as a department, are taking a look at the data that we actually produce, be shared to the public in different forms, and also internally to be able to improve our operational services, reduce costs in various different mechanisms, as well as being able to increase efficiencies in how we do business internally. But more importantly, it's about how do we share the right type of information to the public to provide more of informed decisions in regards to some of the initiatives that the public has in the interest of how the Department of State practices diplomacy. As mentioned earlier, like the foreign assistance, we take some of that type of information and those data sets, and they are prescribed in a certain fashion, a certain scheme that's been prescribed by our Office of Management and Budget in a way that's standardized, so that way the information is consumable by the public in some various way. And so what we try to do is take, as we know, the agencies take a lot of unstructured information and data that we have, and we create it in a catalog, so that way it can be standardized in a way that can be somewhat conformed to the way the methods that the other agencies within the federal government are prescribing their information. So one of the challenges we have is within the department, they have different various sets of information, and one of the challenges we have is trying to make sure that all of our data is structured in a way that it follows a certain standardization, and then by which it can be consumable not only by the public, but also by our internal stakeholders within the department. Because of the fact that we do produce a lot of shared type of information, it creates a sense of awareness with how we take our different pieces and segments of diplomacy and be able to search and see how it can be instrumental in improving the way we do business every day, not just for our internal purposes, but also how to better our efforts in diplomacy around the world. So it's one of the things that we're doing at the department, and we're continuously maturing our catalog. Right now it's about like a 4-year program, so we're still going through the efforts internally to create the efforts of discovering the type of data sets of information that's incorporated into this catalog, and by which this catalog is then transmitted to the public. And one of the things that we recognize by correlating and communicating with the public is that we have to figure out ways and mechanisms to make it consumable by the public. So this depends on, in the sense of how we're actually formatting our information, so that way it's not just a standard PDF file or things of that nature that one can read, but it's not necessarily consumable, and be able to drill down into that information. So one of the things we're trying to do is look at how are we actually going to create the type of construct or mechanism to make the information or these data sets more consumable by the public. It's pretty much what we're doing right now around open data.
Thank you. And I think we can see from the group that we have here the interrelationship between open government itself, the desire to demonstrate good governance by public participation, by making our information transparent, by collaborative efforts internally and externally, and the need for a positive user experience when we are working with the public. Are they able to get to the information or the people that they need to get to in a way that that gives them a positive sense of their government and what their government is doing? The data that we're producing, is it good data? Can we say that this data is valuable data both for us and for the publics, for the civil society organizations that use it? What are we, but not data just for data's sake. Again, as we can see with foreign assistance, how are we working as a government with other governments, with other civil society organizations, with other populations to create the type of environment in the world that a stable environment where people can travel freely, the type of environment that we hope to be able to sustain, and which is one of the major initiatives of having a State Department of foreign policy, to create that stable environment for our country to be able to prosper and for other countries to prosper together with us. So this is what we're all working on. We talk with each other within the department about how can the different pieces fit together, and we find ways that we can collaborate, share information internally, and we're always looking for ways of improving our own internal user experience and our internal access to data. But what we're trying also with this initiative and using this platform right now is to see, can we just have a discussion? And we, as you can see, we went to a conference room. We're just sitting in front of, this could have been done with a laptop computer, where we can sit around and explain what we're doing to members of the public, which is an aspect of collaboration, public participation, and field questions as well. And we want this to be something that can be repeated, not something which takes a lot of effort to put together, but something which can be repeated again and again, where it becomes a normal way of governance, of doing business in an open environment with this type of conversation. So with that, and that's what we're doing here, but we really also need to hear from the participants out there. We hope that you have questions. Chris, if you can explain as well how people can get their questions to us if they don't yet know, and we'll start answering the questions that have come in.
Sure. So for today's purposes, we'll do, I guess, a two-part approach. Actually, three-part. I understand that there's been an email address set up as well for State regarding this process that I can turf to you. For questions that come in the chat section, I'll be reading the questions out loud along with the first name of the person who is asking that question, and I'll do my best to read it verbatim to capture that information. If you don't want to ask any questions now, or you're just tuning in for the show, I understand that there's an email address, and then there's also some lively forum discussions for following after the fact, and then catching the archive. And of course, the archive will be available on YouTube as well. Just to start off, I guess, prompting sort of prompting general question, if that's okay. What's new in this plan? I mean, we talked about how this plan was, set in place with the first day of Obama being in office. What's new, and why is this conversation happening now?
Well, with regard to what's new in the plan, there are a number of with the passing of each year, we do have additional initiatives that make up part of the plan. So there are several new initiatives, whether it is global business registration as a new initiative, or second cities as a new initiative, mapping second cities sort of as an adjunct to the mapping initiatives that we've had before. So throughout the plan, there are quite a few additional initiatives. But really the major shift is how we're linking those initiatives to our foreign policy goals. So whereas with the with prior plans, the initiatives themselves might have been the called the flagship initiatives. The way we've structured it this time is to have the flagship initiatives be the policy goals of the Department of State, to which the other initiatives are linked as supporting initiatives. So that harnessing the data revolution for sustainable development goals, for example, is a major policy initiative. Foreign assistance plays a big part of that. Foreignassistance.gov, FIND, secondary cities, these are all ways of bringing together data to support this major policy initiative. Or modernizing the way we do diplomacy and development is an initiative using a technology like this GovUp platform to try to engage with the public. That could have been that is a separate initiative, but as a flagship initiative, it's supporting the way that how we modernize the way that we do diplomacy and government. Are there things that my colleagues would like to add as far as new areas or things that could be considered new this year with regard to how we describe what we're doing in the past? Okay.
Well, so I would add for the foreignassistance.gov piece, it's looking at how we're doing things. So we've made commitments. We've made these foreign assistance commitments for years now, and we're carrying them through. But now we're really ensuring that they're sustainable and that they're benefiting the intended audience. So in previous years, it was all about gathering data, posting data, and now we're actually trying to work with the intended beneficiaries of that data and ensuring that they're actually able to use the data we're posting. And if they're not, why is it not working? And so really setting some aspirational goals for working with recipient countries, working with academic institutions, working with beneficiaries to ensure that all of the work we're putting into this process is resulting in something in what we're intending it to. So we're sort of taking it to the next step and ensuring that data use is actually happening.
And within the plan itself, we didn't want to add, let's say, new or additional commitments because we have existing commitments that we are tracking via a range of other processes. On sites like performance.gov, the public can see how we're tracking our progress in meeting the commitments that we've made. On data.gov, we have a commitment to put more of our data there, and so that's where we have the commitments that we are trying to achieve, and rather than put new commitments that are focused solely on open government, the commitments with regards to our foreign policy goals are the ones that we are using open government in order to achieve, and those commitments are charted on sites like performance.gov. Any other questions?
Yes. Well, first question coming in looks like getting confirmation I can get a attribution. Is there a way to view the Open Government Plan, OpenGov plan, instead of people sitting at a conference table? So what are ways outside of this conversation that the public can engage?
Well, actually, yes. Within this, we put out a discussion document. The plan itself is not yet published. So right now on the State Department's site at www.state.gov/open, you can go and see the 2014 plan because that's the most recent finalized public plan. What we've tried to do in order to be more transparent and collaborative in this particular process this year is take elements of the draft and put that online within this GovUp platform, but it's also accessible via Google Docs to have the public be able to look at the document. And if they're looking at this discussion now, then they are on the GovUp platform. And so there you'll see the discussion document. And we expect, and what we will be doing is taking the comment, the feedback that we've received through this process, and it's still going through discussion internally. We'll be folding all of that into the draft and have it ready for publication by the 15th, after which it will be on the state.gov/open page as well.
I think something that's interesting too, Andre, even pulling together the open government plan within the State Department, you used a very open platform. So normally where people may have been emailing back and forth paragraphs or Word documents, and then you have to copy and paste and you don't know what other people are saying, this year you used our internal wiki, and that was even something that maybe was unfamiliar to a lot of people within the state, but I think it's helping us open up the work that we're doing internally with our own colleagues, just so we're trying to mimic that with the open government plan with the public.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. I mean, it highlights really the relationship between open government, making our information available externally, and how we're working with it internally as well, because we can work effectively now through technologies like this and via the internet with the public, and we're sharing information with the public to collaborate on coming up with a final product. But what we've also tried to do is use the same type of technologies internally. And so in putting together this particular plan, we took the very, 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 very rough draft and put it into an internal workspace where everybody in the State Department could see it. And the normal process was to put together a more polished draft and send it around and get back and get feedback through email, and then come up with a final draft that goes through a clearance process. Here, what we've tried to do is collaborate effectively internally by putting something which is rough out there for the internal public to see, and have them be able to edit it like a wiki document, so that at the end it can be truly collaborative internally, just like we're trying to be collaborative externally. And so finding that, learning from our internal collaboration and moving that externally, and at the same time learning from how we collaborate externally and moving that internally is part of the learning process that we have right now.
And even introducing the new GovUp platform that we're working with Tech Change, it incorporates both Google Hangouts, Google Docs,
YouTube.
Forums, YouTube, that people use maybe more on a daily basis to communicate with family and friends. But now we're seeing that this is an important way that we can do business more effectively internally as well as with the public. So,
and we've heard from participants on the written forum that it's important to have multiple ways of contacting us and of seeing our information, and we certainly want to try to accommodate that. So this platform is one way, but also we're looking at Google Docs to have documents out there, but we have a number of other platforms on which we can on which we engage with the public, whether it's some posts use Facebook, others are using Twitter. Just before coming into this meeting, I tweeted out that we're going to have this collaboration now, sent a link to the media note pointing people to this page. And so we're all learning how to collaborate and engage in this environment. What else do we have?
Sorry, I was just unmuting myself. Should be back on the big screen. Hi, everyone. So that question, I did receive approval to give attribution. That was from Stephen Buckley at OpenGov Metrics. So thank you, Stephen, for that great question. That helped it contribute. I do have one question here from Martin, and I think this actually gets to your point around earlier the question around PDFs, but the question is around concern is access and readability. So how do you cut through the clutter and get people to actually use and consume the data that you're producing?
Yeah, we have a couple people who might be able to comment.
So I can say that one of the reasons why we're really making this a commitment in this latest action plan is because we found that people aren't using the data that and we've been working for 5 years now to really make a concerted effort to standardize and publish foreign assistance data from across the government. And we thought that there would be an ecosystem, there was demand for that. But what we found is people aren't actually using a lot of the data that we're publishing. And so that is why this year we're making such a commitment to increasing data awareness and data use, working with the intended beneficiaries of this data so that they know how to use the data, they develop ideas. We're doing a workshop in Malawi next month, working with academic institutions to understand how we can make our website better, how we can make the data downloads better, how we can improve the usability of the information, and really build capacity to use the information that we're publicizing.
Could I jump in as well? What you mentioned earlier, Jessica, about FIND is a perfect example. There's so much data out there in the data revolution that it almost overwhelms people.
Right.
But we found with the FIND platform, it allows people to visualize that data in a way that makes it so much more easy to the eyes. Instead of having to read through a 20-page report, you can look through graphs and charts and have that ability to come perhaps to the same conclusion and having data presented to you that is just a lot more easily digested. And this is one of the things that I think data is needing to have in order for it to truly be, if you will, marketable to the average human being who, is not necessarily just a numbers person, but they do want to understand why we're seeing health rates in a given country drop in various diseases, what have you. And this is the ability for data visualization to be seen now, and we should be using these platforms like FIND in effective ways.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's part of what we're trying to do with these workshops is to understand how people want to see data, how people want to ingest data, how we can improve to make the data more useful and meaningful.
Sean, did you want to add?
No, I kind of echo those same thoughts. I think one of the challenges is basically interfacing with these different type of the public or these type of stakeholders to understand what it is they actually want to get and capture those benefits from the data. You mentioned about visualization. I think one of the things about visualization is key is that data can be displayed or illustrated in various different ways. So the key is having a dialogue with the target audience to say and understand what is that type of message that they actually are trying to capture and things of that nature, being able to illustrate the information accurately. Obviously, the data is going to vary, but the key is how do you structure that information and structure that data that tells that story to be able to allow them to make that information consumable and usable. And for our purposes, we're trying to make that a repeatable process that can be utilized externally and more importantly also internally as well amongst our own Department of State stakeholders.
What else we have?
I see. Sorry, I'm just unmuting myself and popping back. Sorry, just popping back and forth. I've been clicking around, so I just want to make sure I'm not accidentally popping up. So this is a question from earlier in the forums that I wanted to actually bring this back for conversation, and it was asking about not just putting this information out there, but how do you build connections with the people who wrote them? So this was a comment from Lucas saying, I have urgent professional priorities, and when whether or not I comment on these documents often doesn't have a direct impact on me or my life that I'm able to see, so it takes a back seat. How do we make the OpenGov community more collaborative so that we're able to build these relationships and communications over time?
that's a good question. I mean, with what we're trying to do with platforms like this, and if anything, having a collaborative effort take too much effort, so that we can't repeat it and build up a sense of a community that engages with each other, where we are comfortable talking with each other, where we have multiple channels of engaging, and it becomes routine. Then it becomes hard really to build those relationships. If I understand the question correctly, it's when you've got people who don't want to just take the data and run, so to speak, or who want to feel like they have a partner with their government with whom they can engage and maintain a constructive, ongoing, collaborative relationship. How do we find a vehicle for that? And every group has its own ways of working, but part of it is building a sense of engaged community, where it doesn't take a lot of special effort to reach out and have the engagement that you're looking for, where you don't have to wait for an annual conference to meet someone, or where it doesn't take a lot of technological effort to put together a forum like this, but where we can put it together on the fly as the issue arises, or say this is something we would do weekly or monthly if there's an engaged group, or using other fora that are available for engagement, whether it's a type of open forum like we have under the, where we ask people to comment on this text document, or if it's a closed email exchange. Each of these can build a relationship. Actually, I'd be interested in hearing from others on how you found it with the workshops or the fora that you're using.
So we're always open and willing and hopeful for feedback. We have a lot of different mechanisms for working with our community. I would say the foreign assistance community is very strong proponents of transparency and very active in that space. Foreignassistance.gov has a number of mechanisms. So we have a regular newsletter. On the website, there is a space where any user of the website can send us an email. We have an active Twitter account. We have regular meetings with different key groups in the foreign assistance transparency community, and then other mechanisms more formal through like these workshops. So I would say we're heavily engaged in soliciting feedback on our
anything about user experience and how we work with that?
Yes, so looking at user experience and user feedback in the programs or platforms that we're designing, one new program that we're working on, or a new initiative for GovUp, is going to be with the National Institute of Health and their National Library of Medicine. And what we're going to do with that is to have both an in-person physical meetup in Uganda in January, where we bring together clinicians, journalists, and policymakers, so three groups that work or that have connected roles but maybe don't always physically get together, and then to have an in-person meeting and to work with those groups to see when we have these continued online engagements, what that should look like and what they want that to look like and what the frequencies would be. So instead of the US government coming in saying, we're going to do this program, it's what do you want? How do you want this to run? How do you want this to work? How often do you want to have these online GovUp? So that we're really working with the users or the participants to create a program that works for them. And also another way that we can do this too is by doing sort of usability testing and user feedback sessions where we're getting out of our office, we're getting out of the State Department, we're going to co-working spaces, we're going to different conferences or events that are already happening, and we're telling our story and we're listening. And I think it's very important to have ways for people to connect online and on forums, but I think it's also so important the face-to-face government getting out of the buildings and talking to people. So I think one thing that I think would be really cool is for a government or for the State Department to have different offices or different temporary working spaces in areas that are already where open government folks are already gathering. So like in the Open Gov Hub or something, have a space there so we could really be face to face working with the citizens and the people that we're trying to all work together for different goals.
Other questions?
Absolutely. So I see another question here. I'm going to try to combine these two, also from Stephen. So asking about how do you also use email and other forms of communication, specifically looking at, and I'll skip to the second one. So I'm going to ask this part verbatim. Is this event going to be saved for later viewing? You could announce its availability, if so, if you had an email group or another means of keeping in touch. So I know that we were just talking about the Twitter account, but also in terms of Google Groups. And for those who couldn't make it here today, what are their options?
I mean, it is going to be available we are making an archive of this particular discussion available for later viewing. And Chris, you might be able to talk about how that can be accessed. I understand it's going to be a YouTube video, which we could link to. We do participate in a number of other groups online. There is a Google group that deals with open government. We have our open government page, state.gov/open, onto which a link to this discussion could be added. We have fora that we are working in to, again, take questions. The challenge is also to try to make sure that we don't spread across so many different fora that we're not able to spend an adequate amount of time in each one, or that the community itself, if we have, let's say, an open government plan community, becomes so fractured with 5 people participating in one group, 20 people in another, 2 people in another, 30 in another, and when really we might be talking about the same things and trying to ensure that everybody is working together in a collaborative way if we're working on the same theme. Sometimes we can serve as bridges to bridge between different groups, and they may be national groups, they may represent different elements of society, but the more we're able to find sort of common cause in a common collaborative area, I think that's a better way, a better approach towards my colleagues have different thoughts.
And I was going to say too, maybe if enough people comment on the YouTube video that they missed this, but wow, it would be great if we did more of these. If there's a demand, then I think it'd be really great to even do a whole series. We could focus on, one element of the open government plan, 1 month or something. So I think we also want to hear from you, where do you want to have these discussions, these conversations, and how can we help do that?
Yeah, that's where we're as we test this out, we're doing this because we want public engagement. The more we're actually getting questions, the more it encourages us to continue this. The more that if we see that the public is coming to fora like this, then it shows that there is a need, a demand, that it's beneficial to have these types of fora.
Agreed. Sorry, just jumping back in. For those who are wondering again about the purpose of the video, the idea is not so much, and also, first of all, an archive of this event will be available immediately after it's finished. It'll be available on YouTube, and we'll share it, of course, with Andre, and to then be shared further. One of the core lessons I think that we've experienced with using collaborative platforms is, people are busy, as Stephen was mentioning earlier, or excuse me, as Lucas was mentioning earlier. And having that archive available allows people to then comment and then post and share in the forums, and then grow over time. So we'll be facilitating that as best as we can. If there's any questions or comments on this video, we'll be available. Just use the @mention sign, and we'll also get an email ping if you @mention me, @Chris, or anyone else on the course platform.
And I should add to that when we get the video, we will run it through a subtitling process so that it becomes Section 508 compliant and can be accessed by people who need to read the words.
Great, just unmute myself again. So I think with that question, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing? It seems like we've got a wide range of perspectives within the State Department, within the table in front of us. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're dealing with in terms of making data more transparent, and how do you address those challenges?
Well, I guess from my perspective, looking at it from a internal fashion, it's about the awareness, the institutionalization of it. Even though this is not necessarily a new concept, it's trying to get everyone on the same like mind to think you have a purpose as a government official to what you produce, being able to have that dialogue and engagement with the public, because you are yourself one of the public yourself. And by which, how do you get individuals to take time out of their busy days to realize the purpose of what they do and be able to understand how to be a contributor to this type of initiative, as far as transparency and things of that nature that benefit those type of targeted audiences. And so from that internal aspect, I think that's one of our biggest challenges, especially when in our nature of business, it's a very dynamic and fluid type of entity where individuals are assigned on a temporary basis and they move on to the next assignment. So how do you maintain that type of level of energy and engagement as from an institutional point of view to make sure that you kind of leave off something there for someone else to pick up and continue that effort?
So I would say our challenges are more system oriented, and that a lot of the data we're looking for doesn't exist in a system. It exists in spreadsheets, Word documents, PDFs, and it's not standardized. And so our biggest challenges are trying to change or modify systems so that the data we're looking for can be housed in a enterprise-wide system, and that everyone is using the same definitions and the same data entry formats. So most of our challenges, and across the government, that's not just State Department specific, we find the same challenges in every agency we work with.
Yeah, I mean, recognizing that what we have is data that can be and should be shared, I think is also a challenge, where we've thought of things that we've written or things that we have been working with as documents, as information that we're working with colleagues on. But once we find ourselves in this electronic environment and we've begun storing our records electronically, flipping that switch to have all who are working within that environment understand that this now becomes something which can be shared, and that it is data with which you can work with others. And if we can identify it as such, identify the data set as a data set, and work with our colleagues internally to make sure that it's in the right format, and finding out what are the right formats for people outside and for people inside to use. I think if there is an internal mindset change with regards to what constitutes data and who's responsible for its upkeep, and the fact that there is value in sharing and aggregating, letting others aggregate it, and that we get lessons too from what the public does with our data we can bring back into our own thought process. What else do we have? I think we can take maybe 2 more questions.
Perfect. So there's just a back and forth right now about what is actually available on state.gov/open. So I've asked for, just feel free to send me an email and we'll make sure to get it in the group as well. One of the questions I think I wanted to ask is not just about the challenges, but also what are some of the benefits? I mean, what's the feedback in a positive sense where citizens and the government can see the positive actions of this approach to open data and OGP?
Where I'll start, I think my colleagues here actually have a lot of on-the-ground experience with this, but this is where we're saying as a democratic government that being able to have the trust of citizens by making data available openly, by giving citizens confidence that they have some insight into the workings of their government, helps ensure the democracy's stability, that the public trusts its government, feels that that the workings are transparent, So this is a long-standing perspective in the United States. We've generally quoted Secretary of State Seward from the 1860s with regard to highlighting the importance of openness and transparency when we began publishing Foreign Relations of the U.S. But with that principle, we also began working with other democracies to form an open government partnership, which is separate from the Open Government Plan. If we say that these principles are good for democracy, that they embody good governance, a more stable government, a government that's more responsive to its public, that's able to accomplish more things, and it works for us, we have a number of like-minded governments where we can share best practices, where we can have insights into how their open government works, they have insights into ours. It provides accountability, it helps avoid corruption, it ensures that we are all working together in providing similar services to all of our citizens, and that the government is responsible to public needs. And so this is what we find internally. And we've put a number of mechanisms in place in our states, not the State Department, but our states have tried to put council meetings online or broadcast city council meetings in order to bring confidence to the council process, and that's changed the way of government in a number of cities. Registration, being able to have more electronic engagement where you can see the progress of your tax refund, where you can see the progress of legislation and your input into it, has given people more confidence that they are in a democratic system and that their government is accountable. If you maybe want to add on how you've seen that with regards to foreign assistance and what the impact of transparency is on publics in other countries, knowing where the assistance is going.
I think so. Part of the reason we're doing workshops is to help encourage data awareness. I'm not quite sure we're fully there yet in some of the countries we're working in, but in some of the places we've worked in, it's certainly helping. We're more on the same page now when we have conversations with other governments, with foreign assistance partners, with beneficiaries. We're on the same page, so we can start conversations from a different level and really getting into accountability and results versus what we're doing. So it's moved the conversation along, which I think has been really helpful. I think we still have a little ways to go in how data is useful and showing more concrete results there. But after this year,
I think we're all sort of moving together as a community of democracies that value openness in seeing how it's benefited, but also overcoming some of the obstacles, of the resistances as well, which is something that we all deal with in our personal environments, sharing information, making what we do available to others, having others be able to see things before they're finished. It's a culture change, and ultimately we see benefits, but we also see roadblocks along the way.
I had one little story. So I have a story about one of our virtual interns. I think it ties together really nicely, data and transparency and becoming more comfortable working directly with the public and sharing and open data. So we have one virtual intern who was helping our Foreign Service Institute that provides language training for foreign service officers who are preparing to go to post. So every year after the language students are at post, 6 months after they arrive, a survey goes out and says, how was what you learned in class, how are you applying this to your work, to your daily life, how was the training? And so every year, hundreds of responses for all these different questions. And our Foreign Service Institute people that were analyzing the survey said, wow, this is so much data. What do we do with this? We know there's this amazing software program, that we're not allowed to have on our computers here at the State Department, but that, wow, if we had that program and had a bright, talented student who is studying, economics or statistics to analyze this data, we would have something really powerful. So that's exactly what they did. They had a virtual intern who, through his university program, had access to this great software and had a great mind and took all this data and said, oh, wow, look, in this area, maybe there's too much time spent focused on this type of training, or there should be more conversational training, or more, what do you do when you're sitting on the bus next to someone that you just met. So I think that really showed the power of working directly with students, with the public, and opening up data and sharing this information that otherwise might think shouldn't be sharing. But it really then helps with the training of all of our diplomats and our foreign service officers. So I just think that's a nice little story to kind of tie things.
Yeah, the more we put data out there, the more we're able to facilitate public participation, because they can work with that data and then they add value to the data and give it back to us. That's the value of that kind of partnership, where we provide something, people outside provide something, and we're working together to develop something which is greater than the sum of the parts. And we couldn't do that if we kept all of our data to ourselves. I think we are just about out of time, if not actually out of time now. If there are there more burning questions which we can't answer now because we're out of time, but we will promise to take those questions and respond in writing on the platform itself. How do we look as far as questions? Are there any other questions?
I do. I see one or two other great questions. One dealing with whistleblowing and looking at the OpenGov plan, and a couple others that are more technical. So what I've asked participants to do is to ask them in the forums or the newsfeed handle so the @ a good friend, and you'll then also get an email notification to prompt you to reply in a more public forum. So there are a couple questions, and there's a means for them to be asked, I think, after we're wrapping up here. But it seems like we're at a fantastic breaking point.
Great. And again, we've appreciated this opportunity. There are others now who need to use this room. So we're going to have to leave the room. But again, appreciated having the opportunity to engage with interested members of the public this way. And we'll look forward to actually feedback on this engagement as well. But thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sexton.
Okay, so we will close off here and assume that you will